Hey, my name is Morgan, also known as Jew, and today I'm going to be making a tier list of NBA teams. I know that it's super early, but I do want to get this done just so that I have it before even the preseason starts. I'm going to be ranking them on which teams I think are contenders, which teams I think could make a run but are very unlikely, which teams are just going to be solid, and which teams are going to be lottery. So let's get into it. So here I have all the tier list of what I have. I have contenders, so these are going to be people that are favorites to win it all that I have personally, probably going to be the same as most people's. Perfect storm is just going to be the teams that are good playoff teams. They're going to be really solid teams throughout the year, but to win the championship, they just need a perfect storm to happen for them to even get to that point. Playoff teams are just going to be teams that make the playoffs, have no chance of winning it, but are good enough teams to make the playoffs. Play-in teams, the teams I think are going to make play-in or be nearby it at least. Lottery is just, I'm going to try to order it in the best way, as which and who's the best, who's the worst in each tier. So let's get into it. Sixers, I have as a contender. I think that the roster that they have, I think James Harden still is regressing. I think he doesn't have that step he has, but the rest of their roster is really, really well built. So I think that they can still be a contender. But I put them on the lower end of contenders compared to other people. Wizards, I have lottery. I just don't think that they're going to be a team that's going to be very good. A lot of these teams I did get to go to going to Hawks games, but I don't think the Wizards were one of the most unimpressive teams that I watched. The Pistons without Cade Cunningham were more impressive. And that was beginning of the year than the Wizards were at the end of the year. So I don't think they're going to be that good. Hawks, I think that they are going to be just a playoff team. I think the first year of figuring it out of DeJounte and Trey, I think a perfect storm could happen, but it's very unlikely that it would happen. Pairing DeJounte is a great fit with Trey. Getting rid of Kevin Huerter and only having one playmaking sharpshooter like Bogey, who's more consistent than Huerter is. Still keep John Collins. I think Clint Capella. They should find they like Clint, but I'm not a huge fan of him. Cavs, it's going to be surprising. I think they're going to be a perfect storm team. I think that they're just a team that has a really good roster. They should have made the playoffs last year rather than the play-in. I think Ricky Rubio getting hurt at the beginning of the season kind of hurt that because he's a really solid point guard off the bench. But bringing in Donovan Mitchell and not having Colin Sexton was just a huge upgrade. Their team is still super young and they can make a lot of noise in the upcoming years. But this year, I think that it's one of those. It's like if they have a perfect storm and everything goes right, they win the champion. They not necessarily win. They get to the Eastern Conference Finals or win the championship. Pistons, I have as a play-in. I think that they are a super fun roster with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. They're just a bunch of hoopers who have fun. Jaden Ivey shows a lot of defensive prowess and he can turn it up to 100 whenever he wants. He's going to be a really, really special piece. Killian Hayes' experiment, I think, is over. But other than that, their roster is super deep and super young. Sadiq Bey is just going to be a demon. Indiana Pacers, I think they're a lottery team, but they're getting close to play-in. With Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner and Chris Duarte, who I absolutely love. I love Tyrese and I love Duarte. I think that in the upcoming years, they're going to be just what they were during the Nate McMillan era of just a playoff team with nothing super special. But Bucks, I have as legit contenders because I had to move this. The Bucks I have as legit contenders because Chris Middleton getting hurt was kind of what ruined their series in the playoffs this year. Other than that, I think they could have been close to repeating. There's not really much to say. Their roster is just really well constructed. Budenholzer is still a questionable coach, but he always coaches a really good defense, so it doesn't really matter. Raptors, I think, are going to be a playoff team. I think that Scotty Barnes takes another jump from what he just was. Fred VanVleet and Siakam on the roster are always going to be really spectacular for you. Other than that, the roster, Gary Trent Jr. How can I forget Gary Trent Jr.? He's such a special two guard. I love Gary Trent Jr. I can't say I always have because I was very skeptical when he was in Portland in the beginning, but he turned it on. He has been incredible. Mavs, I think, are more of a perfect storm than the Cavs because they did rebuild their roster much better, bringing in Christian Wood, so they have a legitimate 4-5 rather than Maxi Kleba. but I think that it still requires a perfect storm of Luka playing even better than he has been, which is hard to say. But Nuggets are another perfect storm team. That with Jokic, with Murray coming back, bringing in Jokic, they still have Aaron Gordon. Their roster is going to be really, really good. I think they're going to be like a top 4 team in the West, just with Jokic alone. But bringing in Murray, it could have a chance for another perfect storm, like a bubble run, like it was in the bubble. Grizzlies, I'm also going to put in a perfect storm. John Morant is showing that he can be that guy in the playoffs. He doesn't really disappear, but he has such a good roster around him that if it happens, people can pick him up. Him getting hurt, it kind of screwed them. Desmond Bane is a really good piece. I love Jaren Jackson. Other than that, their roster is super deep too, and that's why they can win without Ja last year when they proved it. Timberwolves, I think, are just going to be a playoff team. Anthony Edwards is a really special player. Cat is the best shooting big man of all time. But having Cat and Rudy Gobert next to each other, I don't know how that experiment's going to work. It'll have to come when the season starts. But I don't see it really working. So, yeah. There's really not much else. Rudy Gobert is such a weird take. Spurs are just a lottery team. I think are going to be really bad losing DeJounte. They were barely a play-in team last year, and now losing their best player, they're just going to be a lottery team. Jazz are also going to be a lottery team, but I think they're better than the Spurs. Colin Sexton might put up 30 this year. He just might. He can score the ball. He has, as people would say, that dog in him, I guess is a way of putting it. But I don't think the rest of that roster is really, really good. So, I mean, they lost their 2 best players, but I still think they're like a lottery team. Clippers. I think that they're just like a solid playoff team. We haven't seen Kawhi play in almost a year and a half, so I don't know what form he's going to be. If he's up to his like top form and Paul George is up to his top form, I think they can be a perfect storm, possibly championship team. But right now, I just have them at playoff. I don't know how much. Suns I have at contenders, low end of contenders, I'd say, because Chris Paul is old. But other than that, they're still the Suns. They kept their roster pretty much the same. Mikal Bridges was second in DPOY, which I think he still has a chance to win again this year. Portland, I think, is a play-in team. I think Dame should get out of there, as most people would agree with me. I think Dame should say screw loyalty and leave Portland, and nobody would hate him for it. All of Portland fans would love him still. So I think he should get out of there. I don't see I think they should blow up the experiment of what they're trying to do. I don't know what they're trying to do, but it's just not working. Kings, I'd put as a lottery team, but not as bad as I think the Jazz and Spurs would be, because they do still have De'Aaron Fox and they do have Domantas Sabonis, but I just don't. They have nothing else on that roster, so they just aren't. No. Davion Mitchell's like okay, but he isn't that guy. I think the Knicks are like the higher end of play-in teams. RJ Barrett shows that he can be really, really special, but the rest of that team, I don't know. Like, it's such a hit or miss. Julius Randle had the one fluke year, but other than that, they're just not that great of a team. Now, the Pelicans, I think are going to be, I think they're going to be better than the Raptors. I had to move to the Timberwolves. I completely forget about it. I think that they are going to be a very solid. They made a good run during the playoffs last year, or even just like a good fight. They weren't even supposed to make it that far, but I think they have such a young team and such a good team. They're also very well coached. Jose Alvarado coming off the bench is just a great spark. Fans there love him. I love Jose. I've always loved Jose. But they have having Herb Jones, B.I., C.J. McCollum, and then you bring back Zion. And Jonas Valanciunas is a great piece for them. So they just have such a well-constructed roster and are very, very well coached and just play defense. Their defense is incredible. Um, and they got Brandon Marshall. I forgot about Brandon Marshall. And they still have Devontae Graham as another point guard option off the bench. They still have what's his name? Why can I not think of his name? Not Trey Man. I forgot I got Dyson Daniels. Wow. Herb Jones, not Najee Marshall. They have Kyra Lewis Jr. I forgot about him. Yeah, it's Trey Murphy. And then they also have Larry Nance. Their team is just very well constructed, so I think they're going to be a very solid team. I don't think they can get to that perfect storm category, but maybe next year in the coming years. But Pelicans are going to be a really scary team. Hornets are going to be a play-in team, bottom of the play-in. Still didn't fill their center role, which they've needed. They also lost Miles Bridges, and just the rest of their roster is not. They're not a very deep team. Bouknight shows that he can be a scorer, but he's not very efficient. Also, what's it called? Terry Rozier can be super inefficient for them, but he can also just go and get you a bucket. I just don't like the Hornets roster. LaMelo Ball is a super special piece, and he's going to take them as far as they can go. But the rest of that roster is not very well constructed. So, Rockets, I have slightly above the Spurs, but I still think they're a lottery team, possibly a top 3 pick. I just don't think that the roster is in the place. They lost Christian Wood, who's arguably one of their best players. They still are super young with Kevin Porter and Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. Alperen Sengun is one of my favorite sleepers in the NBA. He's just a solid player. But other than that, they're just not a very special roster. So they're just not going to go that far. They're not even going to go anywhere. Heat, I have, is in perfect storm. They lost PJ Tucker, so they don't have that defense anymore that he brought. They still are going to be a very solid defensive team, coached by Eric Spoelstra. They're going to have a good defense, and also having Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, they're going to have a good defensive roster or defensive team. But I just don't think that they didn't make their roster better, so I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But if a perfect storm happens and Jimmy plays playoff Jimmy, and then the rest of the roster steps up, I think they can make it, but I just don't think that they are a contender anymore. Bulls, I think, are very low end of perfect storm, and they just can't get injured. Injuries are going to be the problem for the Bulls this year, so I just don't think that there's anything there. Nets are just going to be high-end play-in. Actually, I'll do low-end playoff for them. They're going to get Ben Simmons. We don't know what version of Ben Simmons we're going to get, but they're going to get Ben Simmons. So, but the rest of the roster is just kind of not strong. Bruce Brown's going to be solid. Joe Harris will be back. But I don't think the rest of the roster is pretty solid. So I just don't think that they're going to be there. Thunder, I think, are contending for a top 3 pick again this year. Their roster stays relatively the same. They have Shea. They did have some really great draft picks this year, but having Chet injured, it doesn't really change the roster up too much for them. So it's just all another developmental year. So I think they contend for a top 3 pick again. Warriors, I have as a contender again. They did lose Gary Payton coming off the bench, but that's like 15 minutes a game. Yeah, those 15 minutes are very solid, but those 15 minutes can be filled in by somebody else. They have they've shown to have a really great development team. They have Moses Moody, who can play that role. They have Kuminga still. They just have such a great roster that I think Jordan Poole can take another step even more. I think that they can contend again, maybe go back to back. Is it likely? No, but Celtics. I put them as my title favorite, actually. I think that the roster that they have, plus they made it better by... Did they bring in Malcolm Brogdon? I'm pretty sure. So yes, they did bring in Malcolm Brogdon. So I think that they can be a legitimate title team. Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. I would prefer Jaylen Brown over Jason Tatum if they're making trade offers, because I think Jaylen Brown's a better piece for you. But I don't think you should really mess with this roster right now. If Rob Williams can stay healthy, they have a great front court. But Daniel Tice just isn't him. I don't like Daniel Tice. I think he's a great ability to stretch the floor, but you need Robert Williams to stay healthy. Lakers are going to be a play-in team. I don't think Pat Bev makes them better. I think AD can't stay healthy unless he proves he can. They can move up, but him and LeBron's just getting too old to the point. Like, he's gonna play at an elite level, but he can't play every game at an elite level, because he can't play every game. He has to do some load management. Magic, I'm gonna have them finishing at a lottery team again. I just think their roster is really weirdly built. They're going to be finishing on the higher end of the lottery, but the amount of point guards that they have in their room, as well as just like how weirdly constructed the roster is for how their style of play is, I just don't see it. Franz Wagner is a really good piece. They've shown that Mo Bamba is finally flashing that potential that he had coming out of college. Jonathan Isaac's a great defensive player. But the Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs room, Markelle Fultz, I'm glad he's getting life again. I love Markelle Fultz. But the Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs, they both need to get that extra step. I don't know where it is for them. So, yeah. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. If content like this interests you, please consider subscribing. Consider leaving a like or a comment. I'm going to be streaming over on Twitch 3 to 4 times a week. I'm also going to try to be posting on here daily or 2 times a day. So if any of that interests you, or if you have any recommendations, please comment them down below. I'm out. Peace.